Yeah, that's good.
Hey there. Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. All right, good deal. I appreciate that. That's good news. See ya. Bye.
It's interesting.
No, get over that. That's it. No, it's yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's good. Wonderful.
Yeah.
He's proud of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's good. Turn 60, like 30.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good afternoon, welcome to the October 17, 2024 meeting of the TPF. For roll call, we have a little item business. Steve Clinton, representing Botetourt County, has requested to participate remotely. Today's meeting of Roanoke Valley TPO under the RVTPO policy for electronic meeting participation, allowing for remote participation for emergency, personal, or medical matters. Physical forum is present, and we can Mr. Clinton is making the request due to medical reasons. Unless there is an objection, we'll consider the request approved by unanimous consent.
Sounds good to me.
Good to see. I don't hear anyone say it. Hey.
Second, yay, go.
Wait, who was that? All right, moving on to item number 2. Roll call. The executive director.
Sure. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Clinton. See you on Zoom there. Ms. White.
Yes.
Mr. Binkowski.
Here.
Mr. Bradford. Mr. Volleson.
Here.
Ms. Reynolds. Vice Chair Turk.
Here.
Mr. Holliday.
Here.
Mr. Lyles. Mr. Stovall.
Here.
Mr. Price.
Here.
Mr. Stewart. Mr. Huber notified us that he would not be able to join us today. And Mr. Gray is here in lieu of Mr. King.
Moving on to item number 3, approval of consent agenda items. A, approval of the agenda. B, action on September 26, 2024 RVTPO minutes found on pages 3 through 43. Do I have? All in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Need a motion.
I move,
Go ahead.
sorry, I move that we approve the agenda and action on the Roanoke Valley-TPO minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Marked by the chair. As you know, the commission has been working with members of the General Assembly to promote Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission's legislative agenda. Second year of our legislative agenda program. While the RVTPO does not develop or promote an agenda itself, several transportation-focused items are included, including investments in the Roanoke-Blacksburg Regional Airport, as well as Route 220. They are among the commission's priorities. Commission staff and members of the legislative committee have met with delegates McNamara, Rasul, Davis, and Overchain to discuss these priorities. A copy of the legislative agenda is available for your reference. The RVTPO and Regional Commission continue to engage in the leadership of the Blue Ridge Innovation Corridor, known as BRIC, to promote investments in Route 220 and the Roanoke-Blacksburg Regional Airport. Chairs of both the TPO and the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission, along with staff, are meeting with Grant Neely and Jay Dickens next week to discuss specific steps we can undertake to partner with the BRIC initiative and advance these important projects. We look forward to sharing the results of that conversation at the next TPO meeting. I also wanted to offer a reminder that due to holidays, the November meeting of the RVTPO will be rescheduled to a combined November and December meeting on December the 12th. That's, I believe, all we have under comments. Moving on to item number 5, overview of passenger rail expansion in the Commonwealth. Well, he isn't. Colin has been a planning manager with VPRA since February 2022 and works on projects in Southwestern and Central Virginia. Colin has worked for transit agencies in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Richmond, Virginia, the Metropolitan Planning Organization in Portland, Maine, and the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Prior to his work in rail and transit, Colin served 4 years as a transportation officer in the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division. Colin holds a Bachelor of Arts in Geography from Northern Kentucky University and a Master's in Urban and Regional Planning from Virginia Commonwealth University. This time, I'd like to recognize and welcome Colin Birch.
Thank you all for inviting me to come speak. As mentioned, my name is Colin Birch, Senior Planning Manager with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. We're a newer agency, so what we're trying to do is kind of get where we have active projects around the Commonwealth, introduce ourselves, and then talk about some of the projects that will be impacting areas that we will be operating. So this first slide shows Virginia's unique position, not only in the East Coast, but really the whole country. It's at the intersection of the North and South, as well as the intersection of the Port of Virginia and the Midwest. So it's kind of in a unique position for freight and passenger rail. And that unique position has allowed Virginia to take a lot of progressive steps as far as passenger rail service expansion is concerned around the country. So this slide's kind of busy. That's kind of the point, though. It shows the recent history of passenger rail in Virginia over the past 15, 20 years. It really started in 2009 when Congress passed the Passenger Rail Investment Improvement Act, or PREA, you may hear it called. What that did was it broke Amtrak down into 3 separate business lines. Those are the long distance services, traverse over 750 mile, multiple states across the country. And they operate primarily on freight-owned infrastructure, a little bit of public-owned infrastructure, but mostly private freight. The second business line is the Northeast Regionals. So those are the trains you hear, the 7. They operate on publicly owned Amtrak infrastructure, primarily from Washington, D.C. to Boston. And the long distance and the Northeast Regionals are both fully funded by Amtrak National and administered by Amtrak National. third business line it created, which is most germane to our organization, are the state-sponsored services. And, oh, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. The state-sponsored services are routes that operate within states or multiple states that are fully funded by the states, multiple states through which they operate. And they are on a mixture of freight and public owned infrastructure. And Virginia, the story that this tells is that Virginia has kind of been the vanguard for passengers, state-sponsored passenger services around the country. We've had numerous expansions, frequency increases since our first route in 2009. We're now up to 8 round trip trains a day. So you heard me say that we're up to 8 round trip trains a day, starting from one. The first one that was state sponsored was the Lynchburg service, the Route 46, which eventually was extended to Roanoke. We also have 2 trains, so there's 2 trains now that extend to Roanoke. One that serves out of Richmond Main Street Station, 2 out of Newport News, and 3 out of Norfolk, for a total of 8 state-sponsored round trip trains in Virginia. We also have some of the long distance services that you heard me mention. Cardinal, Crescent, Palmetto. There's 5 of those round trip that operate daily through Virginia. And then we also have 1 North Carolina sponsored service, the Carolinian, which goes from Norfolk to New York through Virginia. We also have 2 lines on the Virginia Railway Express, which is a commuter line that operates in Northern Virginia to serve DC commuters primarily. They're a partner of ours, and we fund a number of their projects and operations. They have 2 routes. One goes to Broad Run, kind of southwest of DC, and then Spotsylvania, which is directly south on 95. So this slide talks about some of the constraints that transportation in Virginia is facing. There have been a number of studies to figure, anybody that's been on the interstate in Virginia has probably been in traffic. So there have been a number of studies and initiatives to try to figure out a way to improve and reduce the congestion. There was a study commissioned by the previous Secretary of Transportation, Jen Valentine, that looked at the cost of adding 1 lane to I-95 between Beltway, just south of DC, and Thornburg, which is about halfway in between Fredericksburg and Richmond. That study found it would cost about $12.6 billion to add 1 more lane of highway, and after 10 years, the traffic would be just as bad as it was when it first started. Adding to that, passenger rail is constrained in the fact that there's 1 bridge right now that crosses the Potomac from DC to Northern Virginia, the Long Bridge, which is a 2-track structure. I think it was first built in early 1900s, but at capacity right now, so at rush hour, it's at 98% capacity with CSX, VRE, Amtrak trains. So we can't really add more trains to that. The only other bridge that exists that crosses the Potomac is near Harper's Ferry too. So if this is something that happens when the bridge goes out, that's quite the detour. Adding to that, the Port of Virginia is increasing their throughput with freight, and they're utilizing rail much more than they were previously. They're planning to increase their rail throughput. So there is that consideration for increase in freight. And so how do we address some of these concerns? And the approach that the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority has taken with support from the Commonwealth is to execute agreements with the freight railroads, host railroads, you might be involved, to purchase infrastructure and right of way to allow us to build out capital to increase the capacity and frequency of trains in Virginia to move more people. So those freight railroad agreements that we talked about, so far we've had 2.5, I'd say. The first one is here called the Transforming Rail in Virginia Initiative, which was an agreement with CSX where the Commonwealth acquired, I think it's over 350 miles of right-of-way and infrastructure from CSX. And with that infrastructure, we plan to build out corridors where there is passenger service to increase the frequency, or sorry, increase the capacity. The 3 corridors that were purchased from CSX include 3 segments. The RFP, which the Richmond, Fredericksburg, Potomac Rail Line, which you may hear called RFP, goes from DC to Richmond. You can say it goes to Petersburg. That is the busiest spine of passenger rail service in Virginia currently. There's also the S line, which is another segment which stretches from Petersburg to Ridgeway, North Carolina. And that was acquired, that's currently abandoned, but it was acquired in the hopes of route preservation. So one day extending passenger rail service directly from Raleigh to Richmond. We have a project underway right now with North Carolina called, depending on where you live, Richmond to Raleigh or Raleigh to Richmond, so you say R2R. And that will seek to build this out to make a more direct route between Richmond and Raleigh. The other segment is the Buckingham branch, which does have some passenger line on it. Right, it has a long distance. The Cardinal serves Chicago to New York, and from Clifton Forge, Oswald Commonwealth acquired. Again, there's currently no passenger rail between Charlottesville and Doswell, but by acquiring it, we're kind of, if CSX is looking to sell it to us, we know who else that might be looking to sell it to, so we purchased it in the thought of preserving it for them. So that's the CSX agreement. The recent agreement that was executed between the Commonwealth and Norfolk Southern. It's not a catchy title like Transferring Rail in Virginia, but you kind of throw around, make it called the Western Rail Initiative. Originally, there was an agreement executed in 2022 for the Commonwealth to purchase the Virginia line and the V line from Roanoke, 28 miles west to about Merrimack near Christiansburg. And I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but that agreement was amended and restated. So now the Commonwealth is acquiring, this happened just a few months ago. Commonwealth is now acquiring the Manassas line, which stretches from Alexandria to Manassas. So we'll take ownership of that. And that will also free up, will also allow Amtrak trains to operate on the Norfolk Southern Main line, which kind of runs south of the Virginia line, maybe called the NW line or the N line. And that is the most recent agreement, and that is the line that we're going to be using to extend service from Roanoke to the New Valley. So, DPRIQR. We can trace our lineage to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. A number of staff came from there. I came from there. Some of our executives came from there. We were created in 2020, essentially to carry out these plans that were laid out in the agreements with the freight railroads. So we can own land, we can design and build our own facilities. We have and domain powers. And while we will own rail assets and right of way, we are not technically a railroad. So we don't run the trains. We contract out with Amtrak and DRE to operate on our lines. And this is you heard me talk about the Long Bridge. This is the historic Long Bridge, the two-track structure across the Potomac right now. The keystone project for all of our projects, which will open up the corridor into the Northeast, is the new Long Bridge. That's going to be a new two-track structure that will be built adjacent to the existing Long Bridge. It will also include a bike ped element right here in DC. But if you're familiar with the DC area, there's this is the Metro Rail Bridge. So if you're ever taking the Metro from Northern Virginia to DC, look out to the right, and there will soon be eventually there'll be a Long Bridge there. So our mission is to promote, sustain, and expand the availability of commuter and passenger rail service in the Commonwealth. We have a 15-member board that we report to that are appointed by the governor. These terms are staggered. It's kind of meant to political proof us from if the new administration were to come and be less favorable to some of our projects. Some of our projects take 10, 15, 20 years to complete. So we are board staggered in the hopes that we can continue doing the work that we're doing. We're up to 61 full-time employees. I think I was like 12. So now we're like 61 full-time. I mean, one or two added since then. We have offices in Richmond and in Alexandria, and we're subdivided into those departments: finance, operations, administration, and legal. So the New River Valley project, if anybody's been following it closely, it's taken a lot of turns to get to where it is now. But it really started years ago, but the kind of the ink started to hit paper. It was about 2021, 2022, when the Commonwealth acquired the Virginia line, which is this green line here. Well, this is the kind of New River Valley area, the eastern New River Valley. Merrimack and Blacksburg up here, Christiansburg's down here. If anyone's familiar with the uptown Christiansburg Mall, that's right about here. So The B line of the Virginia line was acquired by the Commonwealth in 2022. And the plan at that time was to put a passenger rail station on the B line. 5 sites were considered for a passenger rail station. We looked at basically the area that could accommodate the passenger rail station that had a relatively flat grade. 5 sites were identified. 2 were ultimately moved forward into future consideration. They were both adjacent to the Uptown Christiansburg Mall, although Newer Valley Mall West, Newer Valley Mall North. The only problem with this is that the Newer Valley Mall sites were on the Blacksburg branch, which is a north-south line that connects into the NNW main line. The N line here does not connect into the B line. So in order to access the mall sites here, we would have to construct a connector track in this area. And adding to the complexity of that, this highlighted yellow area is the Merrimack Tunnel, which is about a mile long. Hasn't had passenger service in it since the 70s, so a number of safety regulations have been put in place by the federal government since then. So we have to make safety improvements. So, okay, so this talks about some of these connector track alignments that we had proposed. There were 4 that were identified that could reasonably be accomplished. The 2, so again, to orient it right, here's the mall down here, the Uptown Christiansburg Mall. The Merrimack Tunnel starts right about here. 460 right about here. So 2 of the connector tracks were in the southeast quadrant of the area. They both had a grade of steeper than 2.2%, which is the Amtrak minimum grade for 1 locomotive. The other 2 sites that were identified were in the southwest quadrant, southwest reverse movement, which operationally wasn't the most feasible, and the grade is still above 2%. So the most, I don't want to say feasible, but most, the alternative that seemed to emerge was the southwest quadrant reverse curve. And this is kind of this ear-shaped right here. The grade would accommodate Amtrak trains, however, it would require about 600,000 cubic yards of earth removal construct, and that is all. So another problem, going back to the Merrimack Tunnel, which is right here. The Merrimack Tunnel, very long, very narrow, very dark, very dark. In order to, say there was an emergency in the tunnel, when the train gets stuck, there's a fire or something, we would have to implement safety measures to be able to access the train from the surface if something were to go wrong. So we would have had to construct at least 1 egress shafts that were between 15 and 20 stories. First responders to get down, and we also have to carve out this thing. It's actually the industry term. It's called a coffin. So if people have to get out of the train, they can walk along next to it. That ventilation systems and emergency notification systems. So the cost started to build up very quickly. So our executive leadership team, after getting the cost estimates for the 30% design, then going down to the community and speaking to folks in River Valley about the options to no longer access the kind of E-mall site. We had another idea that would have looked at putting a station east of the Merrimack Tunnel over here in a pretty undeveloped area that was suboptimal. All the options, there were no good options. So this option was the most cost effective and quickest, but the location was suboptimal. This location was clearly very expensive, and the time to deliver service there was far to the future. So you can see the total cost that we were anticipating for the original line, about $546 million, and service was going to start 2028. In January of this year, our executive leadership team, support from the governor's office and the secretary's office, re-engaged Norfolk Southern, proposed accessing Newer Valley along the N line, the main line of Norfolk Southern. They were open to that, and there were several agreements that were in place that included Commonwealth taking ownership of the Manassas line for access to the main. So it's also going to be, so that agreement, the amended, restated here, more cost effective, and we are anticipating service to start in the Valley no later than 2027. So, bottom line is that we will reach New River Valley sooner. This new location, in Fitchburg, if anyone's familiar with Cambria, the historic station down there, it's going to be in that area. Commonwealth will also be controlled from the Manassas line, which is important for a number of things to include dispatching, which I'll talk about a little later. So, yes, the agreement was executed August 27th for the new service, the access camp. So again, just looking at New River Valley where things are located. This was the D line which was originally acquired. We're selling back to Norfolk Southern. From Roanoke here, we are going to use the main line, kind of from the south, taking one to across to Fitchburg. This was the original mall site. This was the Cinnabar Road site that Jeremy talked about, which is a suboptimal location. The new location is on the main line, and it's going to be closer to downtown Fitchburg in the Cambria area. Part of this project also includes the layer facility. The layer facility is just to park the trains overnight, routine maintenance, cleaning, servicing, and there's a location in red for that's 9 miles west of Christian. If you're familiar with Redford, it's right when you cross over University Drive to go to the stadium, you look up to the right, it's right there. So this is kind of a summary slide that talks about everything that has transpired since 2022. This is the original cost. I know before it said 2028, and that was the 2028 to reach the mall site in Cambria, or the Cinnabar location anticipated could have started in 2026. However, that site is not. The local community didn't like it. I think there were a lot of people who were not supportive of that location. A new location in 2024 will be Cambria, less expensive, and passenger rail service will be starting sooner. And this map just shows the Manassas line up here in West Virginia, call-out box. Part of that ownership, what's so appealing to the Commonwealth is that VRE, who operates on the Manassas line, when it was owned by Norfolk Southern, they had to pay an access fee, and we pay a substantial amount of that. So by acquiring the Manassas line, we no longer have to pay for that. We can set the term, but we wouldn't charge our partner. This is the operations maintenance. So this is a kind of call out from D line, and you can see the main line we're going to be accessing Roanoke to the New River Valley. The dispatching services, what that means for the Manassas line. Right now, dispatching is controlled by the freight operators at Norfolk Southern until trains, when to go, their speeds and all that. We have control of that now, so we can dictate the schedule and the prioritization on that. It's also going to enable night and weekend service for VRE, which they currently do not. This is more talking about the Manassas line, like dispatcher. This seminary passage that we're going to be acquiring is right about here. It's an additional yard which allows for more service, and that's going to open up like a reverse commute, so people can take from DC that work in the North Virginia suburbs from DC to, and the cost control of that. That is referencing access that we already formerly paid to. So, one more summary slide talking about the extension to Roanoke Valley. Service no later than 2027. We're going to be acquiring, once the construction is complete, we'll be acquiring a chunk of land where the historic Cambria station sits from Norfolk Southern. Norfolk Southern's they currently have their maintenance way building inside the historic 1908 Cambria Christiansburg Depot. They need to build their building, move their folks out into that building. Then we can start working on parking lot structure. VPRA is actually going to be funding the construction of the canopy platform and passenger track at New River Valley. The parking lot and then the station building itself we're anticipating transferring that to New River Valley Passenger Rail Station Authority, if anyone's familiar with them. They're an entity that was created to kind of ensure that the station is constructed. The same problems that Roanoke had service start with that station. And what we'll also do is, I don't want to say it opened the door for resident services, probably clarify that. A number of agreements would have to be executed with Norfolk Southern, Amtrak, and VPRA before service gets started for Radford. And who knows what could happen between now and whenever in the future. But it doesn't necessarily, in the agreement, there's language that doesn't slam the door shut on potential Radford service. Same with Bristol. In order to access Bristol, which I know is, if anyone following some of their initiatives, folks in Bristol have been advocating for passenger rail service in far southwestern Virginia. And the only way to access Bristol is on the B line, just kind of northwest here up to the Narrows. It does not meet back into the end. So, one more summary slide. The new deal is going to get super spinner value faster. The risks of this project are now on Norfolk Southern. The way it works is they're going to be constructing all of the infrastructure. And then once it's complete, they're going to turn it over to us turnkey, and then we'll take ownership of it. Cost savings. The location is much more ideal. Speak to anyone in Newer Valley, they're much happier than service at Cinnabar site. And the additional service, Bedford, this will also allow for a potential future station in Bedford. Mainline to Bristol, way down in the future. By no means am I saying this is something that could happen in the immediate future. And also the control on the Manassas line. The weekend and night service for VRE, that's also a big benefit to the Commonwealth. And this is kind of this is a picture of the old historic Christiansburg Depot building, which we're hoping the station authority will renovate. And this is a rendering of what the new station will look like. We're hoping to kind of replicate similar canopy that exists around. So some of the immediate next steps. Norfolk Southern is in the process of completing their final design of the project. And on our end, we have to complete an environmental impact review, submit to the state. So we have submitted that 2 weeks ago. And then we're hoping by spring of 2025, construction will begin. And then some of the later steps, there is a $2 million CRISI grant attached to this project that the VPRA is looking to transfer to the station authority to assist them with renovating the existing historic depot. We also have to outline some of the roles and responsibilities between the station authority and VPRA because the project has changed so much. And no later than August 2027, the property that Norfolk Southern currently owns, they're building the passenger rail infrastructure and will transfer to us, and then we'll have passenger rail service to Christiansburg. And here's a larger rendering of what the station building could look like. This could obviously change. And you'll notice there's a passenger track right here. Currently there are 2 mainline tracks right here that aren't shown in the rendering, but this shows a passenger track platform, which will be level boarding, so you can pour your bikes on and off, or the mobility impairments. And then the canopy, which we'll also be constructing. Wood station is configured very close to the station. There'll be one patch where there's no canopy, but on either side of the building. It will be about 4 feet above the exit to the station, so you have to come out and move around. And then this aerial shows kind of conceptual footprint of where the station will be. And if anyone's familiar with the area of Depot Street running here, in terms of Cambria Street, there's currently an old bookstore right here. That the property for that is going to transfer over to us as well. The building itself, the building will maintain with the owners, and the land underneath it will transfer to us. Very, very confusing to me. We have about 150 parking spaces, enough for 3G buses to pull in. And yeah. That's all this. So happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Any questions? Peter?
With the taking over the Manassas line and having more control on that,
And the train from DC is normally delayed quite a bit getting to Roanoke. Does that improve our ability for the train to be more reliable and on time?
That service probably wouldn't, I mean, hopefully, yes, it would, but the dispatching is just gonna be the VRE portion. I know that the Amtrak travels over the VRE, but the VRE operating portion. I know that Amtrak will travel over a lot of the VRE operating portion. That dispatching will still be the normal. And also in the future, I meant to mention this, anybody that's taking a train beyond DC is probably at a stop in DC and then that's locomotives. Amtrak is refleeting their entire fleet with these new aero train sets built by Siemens, and they're dual mode locomotives, so they can run on diesel or pull into Washington Station, extend the pantograph and connect to electrification and continue north. So that dwell time is going to be cut drastically for the new service, which is supposed to start. Speaking of how Virginia is kind of on the forefront for state-sponsored service, the first of these are scheduled to roll out in 2026. Go to Washington State first, and Virginia will be the second state to some of the new everything.
Any more questions?
I was gonna ask you, what, like the inline of Christiansburg, and if you wanted to extend it to Bristol, I mean, the tracks, are there already tracks in place that go all the way into Bristol, or?
Yeah, there currently are tracks. It's only single track from about Radford to Bristol, and that's about 120 miles. So there would have to be significant infrastructure upgrades built along that line to allow for more.
No, you're right.
Oh, sorry.
There is this single line there. This would then be a third train a day. That is, you have two for Roanoke today. So a third train would be allowed to traverse into this new station down there at Rapid.
So what we're gonna do is extend basically the two trains that currently terminate in Roanoke. Both of those will then be extended to the New River Valley.
Both of them will be trains. Okay, so it's not really a third train.
No, so this little blurb is about, there is the possibility for a third train to serve the region
When the bridge over the Potomac is,
as more infrastructure gets built out.
right.
Yeah, the agreement is not specific about it, but
Mhm.
it kind of it's canon current language where someday future agreements could be executed with Amtrak and Southern to add a third to the Route 46.
Something to think about. This platform here is good most of the time because we got good weather. There's been times when people have been standing out there and it's in the middle of the winter waiting for a train. The train's in the holding yard. For one reason or another, the crew's rested enough. And so they might stand out there an hour and a half in the elements, or else go get in their car and hope that they don't fall asleep in their car waiting for the train to come and miss the train. So I don't know if there's any thought to improving the infrastructure of the platform, but I'm just passing along the things I've noticed.
Yeah, that'd be a station.
I was just gonna say, we have land for an Amtrak station. We've been waiting to hear from Amtrak since the pandemic as to whether or not they want to do a station here in Roanoke. It's really just waiting on Amtrak.
Do you follow up on that yet?
Yeah, and we can, if there's anybody that needs to get in touch with Amtrak, I know we've been working with the engineer Roanoke about somehow. There are a lot of requirements with Amtrak, and you ask one person one thing, I say something, somebody else will say something else. So we are trying to work through that with Amtrak to figure out how much space they require, how much that's going to cost us.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, if you just took the platform and had half of it enclosed with some clear material, whether it's glass or whatever, that would be a good short-term, good solution versus what you got today.
Yeah, and right now, there's that issue where when it comes from the labor facility back to the platform, but when it is at the platform, they can board, passengers can board, however, it's at River Valley, they're not gonna have that.
Yeah.
Well time.
Sure. Talking about the delay, most of the delay, thank goodness we're not down south in Mississippi and Alabama. That's where you get a lot of delays on the train coming out of New Orleans, which can be 2 or 3 hours late sometimes. But the delay challenge in Charlottesville, north, Lynchburg, actually north, you got double tracks, you got intermodal trains a mile and a half long.
Hmm.
That, depending on where that is, half the train will have to wait.
And there
That's
are-
where you sometimes run into that problem.
Yeah, we have another project that's going on, well, it's a Norfolk Southern Line project that we're up on, Nokesville to Calverton, just adding a third track
Yep.
to that area to
Yep.
improve the congestion.
Okay. Any more questions?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, the commission's legislative agenda talks about a rail to Richmond, and I know that project, there's nothing in the books, or I'm kind of looking at that right now that I'm aware of, but I don't know if you can maybe speak to some of the broad, challenges or preconditions. You know, the ability that that project might be, and if there's anything that's like currently that we know is an issue that the commission could be thinking about. Or something.
So yeah, I would say there's nothing there, but our sister agency, Department of Ground Public Transportation,
Mhm.
were awarded two, so the quarter ID, which is FRA's new grant funding program. They were awarded seed money to do a study. Two of them, one was from the Newer Valley to Hampton Roads. It's called the Commonwealth Corridor. I don't know where that's at. I know they awarded the funding to start the study. And that would use up at Charlottesville kind of. This obviously hasn't been finalized, but I would imagine would veer right east at Charlottesville, take the Buckingham branch to the RVTPO down. So that study is out there. They were awarded another quarter ID grant for a study from Bristol to DC. So that one is another study. There are two studies right now. What it does is once you get awarded the seed money, you're entered into the program and they're eligible for future funding. So they're leading that.
Anyone else? Well, that's some good news, and we'll get rail service to the New Valley a year earlier. I never understood why glad they rectified it, because that tunnel was problematic,
Yeah, we had
at least.
a lot of support from the Secretary's office, a lot of support from the governor's office. So I
Yeah.
think without their full, it would be much more difficult.
$1 billion.
Yeah, that was prohibitive, to say the least. It's pretty good.
And if you have any future questions, feel free to reach out to me. It's a business card if you want. I'll probably leave after this, but I can leave them on the table. So. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Colin, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Item 6, update on regional truck parking study, page 44 of your agenda, Tori Williams. Tell us what the update is.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the policy board. You will recall one of the items in the work plan for FY 25 was conduct a regional truck parking study requested by Roanoke County. We outlined fairly broad objectives for the study that I believe we shared with you earlier. Just wanted to provide a quick update on where this study stands. We met. Let me take it one step back. VDOT, and by VDOT I mean Michael Gray, was very helpful in helping us work with OIB to access their bench consultant process. And through that, we were able to select Michael Baker International as the consultant to lead this study. We had a scoping meeting with them on October 15th, Jeremy and I, with Brad Shelton of Michael Baker, and he invited a gentleman named Tom Spalen, who is based in Pennsylvania and works for a consultant called Gannett Fleming. He's sort of a national truck parking study expert. And they will be preparing a scope for the study that they'll deliver to us. I think they said around November 1st. And one of the tasks that Mr. Phelan suggested that would create a regional stakeholder group to help them identify what the key truck parking challenges are in the region. Fortuitously, Dale Bennett, who's the president of the Virginia Trucking Association, spoke at the Chamber Tag Group last week, and I was able to connect with him, and he said he'd be willing to help us any way he can with this, in terms of reaching out for folks to participate in the stakeholders. So the essential story here is that when things are moving on, we should get the scoping study in a couple weeks, and there'll probably be some more communications out to the TPO and the TTC and other stakeholders that we need to hear from this study. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Or
Just a comment. That is a huge undertaking. I forget what the last number was of number of trucks on I-81 through this area, but I know it's over the design. In my past life, the trooper, I experienced this quite a bit. And we used to say that you could build a rest area for trucks from Bristol all the way up to Roanoke, and it wouldn't be enough. The truck traffic is just so high. So this is a real need, but and what an undertaking that's going to be. It's going to be big.
Yeah. Mr. Fennell was pretty clear that this is a national problem that he's worked all over the country, and we're not immune to this issue. So.
And is their plan to look at designated rest stops just for trucks like the one they have down in Washington County? Or is this to get them off the highway into another area?
Both. He talked a lot about how he's come to the realization that bringing the economic development folks to the table. So if, let's say, a community has a new prospect for sort of industrial company or manufacturing company, the economic development people would work with that company. So they would build, as part of the new facility, adequate truck parking that would then serve that facility. There's a lot of interesting tidbits, and Jeremy, you can add some additional flavor and context.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, this guy was going kind of a mile explaining all of the issues with this across the country.
I feel pretty confident that we'll have a comprehensive review, but Mr. Kowski, I think the answer is the end result of this will suggest a range of possible solutions that are everything from what needs to happen upstream on and the various policy and legal. You can't just build stuff. There's a lot of other things involved with that, and how that will affect the demand here to what needs to happen at the local infrastructure, enforcement, technology. Truckers use all kinds of sort of apps to determine where they park, and there's a lot of things that we don't know always where tools. So he mentioned some of that. The trucker might drive farther if they can preserve a parking space and know they had it. And so where does technology fit in, and how can locally our economic development folks from the get-go, work with that? So I think there's a lot of things we will know to see, but the goal of this is to identify things that we're probably not even thinking about to address this, because it's a huge and it's not clearly not going to go away anytime soon. So.
Well, you may want to throw in there truck driver psychology too, because there are no parking signs up and down the interstate everywhere. And every time you go by it, there's a truck sitting in front of it. The Bradford rest area, they've gone as far as putting big chunks of concrete in the way so that they don't park in those locations. But I am definitely in favor of trying to find a solution, because when they create their own parking spots, it's not long after that, you have shoulders that are destroyed, you have trash, litter, crime. So it's definitely a very important issue.
Well, he made that point too, in terms of, well, let's say you open a new facility. Who owns the facility? Who operates the facility? Who monitors the safety of the facility? Who does maintenance on the facilities? There's some really tricky operational questions.
And I would also further, I think there's going to be short-term things, but I'm hoping, and we talked a little bit about scoping, how can our localities be armed with the right data and education to work at the state level, and let folks know that there are all kinds of complex regulation that and policy that determine where you can build things upstream and where you can build things along. And, there may be some things that we can start working out for delegates, just educate them. What needs to happen in Richmond to open up a place that's not, using more better used land locally.
Yeah, land along the interstate, of course, is gonna be valuable.
Mhm.
I'm sure that would factor into it, but if you could get them to get off, go to a location further away, that would be ideal, but my gut tells me that half of them are gonna say, no, I'm not getting off the highway, I'm gonna find a spot here. And you're back to square one, create a spot.
Got all that land under option. What's that area, Ellison? Are they intermodal yards one day?
Still will be, it still will be.
Maybe, maybe not. Could be a big Bucky's put in there with a major. Right there.
Give me the phone number, I'll call
555-1212.
them.
What are the geographic boundaries of this study? Is it the entire region?
Yeah,
Covered
we
by the
told them,
commission.
we'll scope that out specifically, but we told them the corridors of statewide significance. So that's 81, 11.
All the way, I'm thinking of North Valley.
Yeah,
And,
Exit 128.
so, yeah, and
That'll help.
like he said, we all have our truck stories.
Yeah.
Where we are in North Valley, they line the exits and you can barely get on if you're going to work in the morning. You can barely even get on. So that's,
It's-
I want to make sure those areas are covered. if
Sure.
it's-
he told us a story that trucks going into Boston typically stop in Albany to work. And Albany was having a real issue with regional truck parking. And he advised them to have Massachusetts and New York work together because they'd be, I guess, rated higher in applications for federal grants, things like that. So obviously, they'll give us a scope and we can, that's why I think we need the stakeholder group to share information on where these trucks are massive together.
The other thing we'd like to share to the trucker psychology comment, there's a number of truck driver training programs in our region that teach these drivers. Might be nice to let them at least know about that, and if they could be any benefit to the study, I'm sure they would be willing to participate.
Yeah, no, that's very, sure. All right. Any other questions?
I've seen one of the newest trucking areas is exit 118, Christiansburg. Coming up the mountain there. What used to be 102, now it's a whole string of truckers on the shoulder, so that's becoming a popular choice.
Well, I will just say that in 1983, trooper could sit on the interstate and not see a truck for a half an hour.
Yeah.
Those days are long
There
gone.
you go.
You could start either at that location you're speaking of, or exit one, or the Bradford rest area. And it'd be a quarter mile of trucks. You could go by, wake every one of them up, send them all on their way, make a loop of the interstate, it's 25 mile. By the time you come back, they're all filled in. It's a demand because even the truckers will tell you, it's not just a matter of getting a sleepy truck driver off the road, which is very important, but it's, the federal government puts restrictions on their hours, so they have to.
Got 11 hours to drive, 11 hours to
Yeah.
14.
That's right.
So they gotta park.
They got a point. Yeah.
So they've just said, y'all figured out states, that's what basically they said. Yeah, big problem. Anyway, any more questions for Tori? Comments? Okay, if not, we'll move on to item 7, which is an update on the TED study.
Okay. Another item in our work program that we talked about previously was the Transportation and Economic Development TED study. We had a kickoff meeting, was that last week? That was last week, wasn't it? Over at the Fralin Biomedical Research Institute, in combination with the SED, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, which is also undergoing an update in FY25. And we had the following speakers. John Prolo from Virginia Tech did an overview of the regional economy. Michael Friedlander gave a wonderful conversation on the innovation sector and all the wonderful things that FBRI is doing. And provided actually a very nice segue into Anthony's by listing off a couple of transportation issues that FBRI was concerned with. So Anthony, of course, did an overview of regionally significant transportation projects. And I think in conversation with Anthony and Kim, Anthony's going to be delivering the same presentation to this group on the 12th. So,
Good.
so that was our kickoff meeting. You may recall that the TED study update, we're going to be trying to get information and learn about what significant projects are out there by having focus groups with localities and private sector stakeholders and others. And we have set aside some blocks of time, and we asked that the localities schedule through this program called Calendly. I always have trouble saying that, but you can just go to this site here. There's a card I think I put out that you just go up, see some blocks of time. You put in the time you'd like for us to come meet with you and have a discussion, and we will make those arrangements. Amaya Matthews here, you met, I think, at the last TPO meeting, is arranging that. So if you have any difficulties or challenges, get in touch with Amaya. I think we have four scheduled already. So please sign up as soon as you can. You want to talk to, obviously, transportation planning. Any group that a locality thinks can provide some insight to us. And I saw this last week, and I thought I would just share it real quick. We talked about, and I think Mr. Chair talked about earlier, the legislative agenda. We want to, as a region, just try to identify some ways that we can amplify our collective voice to whoever will listen to us in Richmond, Washington. And I saw this last week. The Greater Washington Partnership did a refresh to their blueprint for regional mobility and listed some clear goals. Those are their top transportation objectives that this is a group from Baltimore and DC and Richmond, mainly the leaders of some large companies, but some other entities involved. So again, I'm just pointing this out, that this is sort of our target with this process. And if you'll indulge me just for a couple of minutes, I wanted to tell a story today that I think our region works together fairly well, but at times in the past it didn't. And I thought I would help illuminate why we need to work together and what happens if we don't. So, in 1970, a group called Talbot Cox and Associates did a master plan for the Roanoke Airport. And they wanted to, the recommendations included expanding the terminal building, adding 900 feet to the east-west runway, and putting in some safety field features, including a fire station, putting some fencing around the airport. There are a few other recommendations. Anyway, the main problem here was the runway was too short, which prevented full planes from taking off and landing. But that problem would be exacerbated as airlines in the 70s were starting to add 757, 767s, Airbus, and the Roanoke Airport would be completely eliminated from servicing these larger planes. So they have a nice study that comes out in 1970. Roanoke City Council, after a couple of years of analysis, in October of 1973, grants approval to the runway extension, and they apply to the FAA for some funds. In 1974, the Planning District Commission, this one included, one for Martinsville, which is West Piedmont, the River Valley, and Central Virginia Planning District Commissions, pulled together some resources to conduct a study that would, quote, develop a realistic plan which would furnish information and guidance for the governing bodies on the provision of adequate air transportation facilities. This was spurred by Lynchburg and Martinsville, who were having discussions about a regional airport that would serve their communities, and they asked Roanoke to be involved. Well, the city of Roanoke didn't like that conversation. They had already invested some money in Woodrum Field and didn't want really any part of this. In 1975, the FAA comes back and says, we're not going to approve any of the funds recommended to complete your master plan until the results of the PDC study are complete. So anyway, in March of 1975, Roanoke County has a Board of Supervisors meeting. Fortunately, there's no one in this room, I think, that's old enough to be a part of that. Although Richard Flores.
Oh, no, I was there.
Oh, no.
Back brother.
Hold on a minute.
Uh, And they come out with a resolution against extension of the runway at the Roanoke City Airport. And there's also a citizens, letter campaign to the FAA opposing extension.
Yeah, and you know what I never understood about that, if I could interject?
Sure.
Wayne Compton, I don't know if he walked in this door right now. All I know is I wrote a lot of checks to him over the early years after I moved here. Commissioner Revenue came out with an opinion. He should be collecting taxes, not worried about it.
Yeah.
I can't understand that one, but then I guess that's above my pay grade.
Yeah, so their argument that this was gonna create a blighted community next to the airport, and furthermore, looking out at the long range, because Woodruff Field is surrounded by mountains, it'd be a challenge to ever get larger planes in. So, anyway, so they have that meeting in March 1975. A week later, the chairman of the Roanoke Airport Commission comes out and blasts Roanoke County for passing a resolution against the extension. You can see where this is going. March 1975, again, the PDC group has a meeting, and they kind of coalesce around a plan to build a regional airport in Pinhook in Franklin County. That never went anywhere. Meanwhile, while this is going on, in 1972, the General Assembly had a study commission studying air service across the Commonwealth. They come out with a study, and they find that Roanoke Airport could meet airport needs by their target date was 1990. And they said, yeah, Roanoke can meet those needs. And Roanoke City latched onto that and said the state supports expansion of Woodruff Field. A couple years later, 1977, this beauty comes out. This is the Blue Ridge Air Transportation System Study. This is the PDC study. We found it in the basement. And it called for the development of a regional airport south of Bedford, midway between Lynchburg and Roanoke, and converting Woodruff Field into a general aviation airport. So, needless to say, nothing got done. I found this article from the Roanoker in 1981 entitled, "Why is Roanoke Running Piedmont Out of Town?" It's kind of an interesting read. Summary of the dysfunction. I bring that up in the context of another airport plan. Charlotte in 1968 has a study that says we need a new terminal, we need a longer north-south runway, and we're going to consider how many extensions that runway will need in the future. They start immediately with land acquisition and the construction begins. They hit a little bit of a stumble in 1975. There was an injunction from some environmental groups, and they had a bond referendum to fund the actual terminal construction they built. Anyway, a few years go by. The lawsuit gets resolved. The referendum eventually passes in Mecklenburg County by a vote of 2-1. Runway gets paved in 1978, opens in 1979. Piedmont chooses them as a hub. They become an international airport in 1982 and went from the 33rd busiest airport to the 6th busiest airport. So I just want to sort of relay the perils of regional dysfunction. Again, not laying that at the ground at the feet of anyone in this room, but in the past, there have been episodes where things haven't gone so well. And we're hoping that at least the TED study will facilitate a greater regional cohesiveness and dialogue on what our common shared regional challenges are and opportunities to fix them. Yes, sir.
And let me just add a comment to that. Roanoke County today supports the airport expansion. And so all we want to know is who to write a check to one day. Our board stands behind it. It's in our legislative agenda. If you all do not have a legislative agenda today, I would encourage you, it's too late for this upcoming session, but to work on one in the future, because if we're all in agreement about the airport, then it's an easy fix. The Blue Ridge Innovation Corridor has a list of legislators that have signed on to improving the lanes from Carolina all the way up to 8164, because if you take that population, we're bigger than Northern Virginia, Tidewater separately, and or Richmond. You got to get together, because if you don't have that cohesiveness to get money out of Richmond. And so Eric Phillips, who's a Williamsburg graduate, led that trend, been leading that charge. We're going to learn more about brick effort next week. And also, we're going to find out in the future what's going on down in Raleigh. They were so successful Today, the airport has a special exemption, the FAA to operate, period. Because the runway is challenging for takeoffs and landings. Okay, never mind the fact that if we're ever going to attract carriers that don't go to hubs, i.e. Denver straight into Roanoke or Dallas, you got to have a long runway. It is what it is. And I will go ahead now and lay this on the table for our VDOT representative who's in this room. Someone walked up to me the other day. I think I see who it is on the left-hand side of this room, my left, and suggested that VDOT have a role in the tunnel. Of course, they're going to have to because it's going to go over 81. So
Yeah.
we have a choice. If we want to be the way it used to be, and it was left that way in the 70s, you're not going to see economic growth. You're not going to see increased passenger service. You're not going to see the benefits of all of those transportation and economic incentives, and we're just going to be the way we are. And, you know, there's some people in this area, they like it the way it is, but leave it alone. If it ain't broke, go fix it. But that's all I'm saying is that Roanoke County doesn't take that position. They strongly support of the airport expansion. I think I can speak to every member of my board, but we embellish that in our legislative agenda.
When I was at the VML conference 2 weeks ago, had a discussion, Peter and I spoke with, and I think, Hunter, were you in the room at that time? But what do we need to do?
Yeah.
What kind of support do we need to get? What do we as localities need to do? Because the aviation board representatives, if you see how they're broken up and who they represent, Roanoke is at the tail bottom of Northern Virginia's, whoever the representative is. Right below that is Virginia Tech and the Blacksburg Airport. They got an extension on their one runway for 1,000 feet, and we're like, you know, Southwest Virginia. So it's a big challenge, but we've got to make a lot of noise. I think that if like at meetings and at conferences, and just keep banging and making the noise, because they don't do anything if they don't have to do anything. And if we don't push, it's not going to happen. We have to push hard.
And I think the regional commission's legislative agenda has done just that in the first additional year or two. We got that in our agenda. Roanoke County's going to keep it in the agenda for every year until something happens. I hope when comes along and changes that. So we've made some headway, but all I'm saying is we all got to be speaking from the same hymn book. And that's why I'm saying the first step is to adopt a resolution. Didn't, you need to do the same thing. And, you know, all respect to the mayor, just because Roanoke County does it, it adds more power if the towns do. Salem does, Pontotoc County does, because we all benefit from it. One of these days, gentleman from Pontotoc is not going to be here, and he won't be speaking in Richmond in the transportation perspective like he has been. He's going to one day not,
Right.
that's it. So we got to have some strength in our communities to carry the message.
A comment was made that we need to get creative in the way that we look at acquiring the money for that. And that's why VDOT was brought up, in fact, brought up on the state level, this board, and said, you know, that this is something that's pretty critical. Look at where VDOT can play a part with it. Look at who else can play a part in it. So.
Well, my history, as you very well may not know, as you know, I served on the school board in our county for 20 years. That I have seen is the fact of getting the resolution, taking your lead, how many localities will join into the resolution, and asking them, any legislator we can, whether we all get in a vehicle and drive to Richmond for 15 minutes, take the press in the door with us.
That's
And
the
say,
key right there.
take your press in and go, okay, here's all the localities we have. You know, you expanded the Virginia Tech for, 1,000 feet. So this is what we would like. What's our next step? You tell us what our next step is. Because next year, not to get into political arena, but next year they're all up for reelection.
Mhm.
So, we do that now and then let them tell us, okay, this is the step you need to take. And then as localities, we all, as localities, speak in unity that this is the person we're going to do next. And then once we talk to this person, where we go next, and then just keep going.
Just for point of clarity, the Blue Ridge Innovation Corridor wrote a letter And all the people signed on to it were state legislators, delegates, about 16 of them, to the secretary. And the airport was part of that initiative.
And I'm not saying that the resolution, emails, all that stuff doesn't work, but I'm gonna tell you one thing, when they're sitting at the table, looking at you right straight in the eye, whether it's 15 minutes or 15 hours, you know, it's just like, I think one of the best meetings we ever had, I know we got off track a little bit, was when Terry came. You know, he delivered more information in that 30 minutes of sitting right there at that podium, and I've heard from General Assembly probably since Dick Cranwell was there. And so anyway, I mean, that's my opinion as far as, you know, 2 cents, 3 cents, whatever it is.
All the legislators agreed that if you want to accomplish something, you got to work as a region. You got to
Sure.
work together.
Sure.
We just met with our legislators. We do it every year in Montgomery County. And, it was last Monday night, and same thing. The board members started hearing things that they hadn't heard before, but the reoccurring theme was work together as a group. You want to accomplish, it doesn't matter what it is, but if you can get all your surrounding counties to work together, you're going to get some attention.
Well, Steve, look on that, I mean, you look on that wall right there. Look at all the localities hanging on that wall. So we get all those localities in a room with a resolution in front of the legislators and say, you know, this is where we're at. This is what we want to do.
And this is a good body to do that in,
Sure it is.
but we don't always talk about these things. We have a legislative agenda, have always had. And what we need to do is send it to Roanoke County. You send us yours in the preliminary stage, and we could kind of work them out together.
There you go, brother.
Now, you put me on the spot now. Do I have one to give to you?
I want to hear from the commission. How about?
All right, I'll just buy you a couple.
Give me one of those counties. Run county.
Y'all have been replicated.
And you all did the same thing we did. We had 2.5 pages of,
Yeah.
a wish list, and we put it in this size. And the legislator said, yeah, that's good. I can put it in my pocket, as long as it doesn't go in the trash can.
There you go. We're exchanging cards, you know. One of these days, it's gonna be collectible, worth a lot of money.
And this was the one for last year. We'll have one.
But, you know, I think we've got a good start, but. And by the way, we're not having that this year.
The legislative luncheon, yeah,
When we go down to Richmond, I go look for every legislator. If they're not there, I give them one of our cards.
If you do want to meet with them, the best time is October.
It is,
Right.
absolutely.
They've said that a lot of ours have drifted into November, and several of them couldn't do it.
Yeah, one person has been gone for a month, so that's it. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you what, when they keep seeing you coming and pulling out one of these all the time, sooner or later something's gonna click. I don't know if it will click, but we're gonna learn more about the brick and what they're doing next steps, because I'm sure they're going to Richmond too with some app.
and I just want to say, I appreciate Tori kind of bringing this whole thing in context. I think the point is well made, that we don't behave like that. So which is the really important first step, but there are certainly some action, and some of these are already underway. We're working with Brick in the private sector. There are, there's a trip to Raleigh to look at what Raleigh has done and how they've worked with their private and public sector. So there are definitely things underway that clearly didn't happen back in the 70s in this region. I appreciate the fact that this is not controversial. We're already, trading our legislative Pokemon
We're on the
cards
same.
here, during the meeting, because that just indicates that we've got a good head start. But there's certainly a lot of work. And I think there's some great ideas of what we can do to get involved.
And the 1/3 of the General Assembly has been or new, never served before. And a good number of them, they don't even know what Roanoke, Virginia is.
They'll make good victims, won't they?
They haven't even been down here. So they're the ones voting on this. And today, the chairman of transportation and the chairman of appropriations in the House are from either Prince William County or another one of the 3 big regions. They're not from around here.
Look at that map.
Mhm.
It'll take you long to look at that map. I mean,
The map of where the representatives.
Yeah,
and Roanoke's here.
it's in this packet right here too, on one of these pages.
Yeah, you mean the brick,
Yeah, right.
brick pack.
Right.
And, boy, I just want, I'm so glad that after touring this building one day, the roof commission didn't tell you all just trash all that stuff downstairs, but you never found what you did.
There's a smorgasbord of stuff down there. We really
Yeah,
need
it
like 3-4 interns to go down and catalog all this stuff.
I think that we ought to plan that the archive, the whole region, maybe we get a grant to maintain it. Different control group. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Moving on to, other business item 8, just a reminder, the STBG and CRP deadlines for applications are October 31st, 2024. Is that correct, Corey?
Yeah. Allison's, she left.
Okay.
She told me this morning that, as you know, we're taking, this is for the sub-allocation programs, STBG and CRP. We're evaluating the status of the existing programs and considering new requests for existing projects. She said that we've gotten all but a handful, maybe 4 or 5 updates on the projects, but we've only gotten 2 requests for additional funding for existing projects. So if any localities are out there, I'm gonna check with your transportation planners, tell them the deadline is October 31st. And if they have any additional funding requests for existing projects, not new projects, existing projects, the deadline is coming up in a week.
I,
Just wanted to reiterate that on her back.
all right. Moving on to item 9. Wait, we want to get
That we're gonna do that.
under item 9, we do have 2 things. Jeremy, you want to share the DRPT and then?
Yeah, just real quick, Mitch Huber from DRPT cannot attend today. He sent a couple of items to be updated. You have a copy of these at your desk, and we'll include them in the minutes. But I just wanted to highlight the DRPT Connects Communities campaign. It's a program to promote the use of public transportation. That will no doubt be Andrea Garland in our office, who is at a conference in Fort Collins, Colorado right now. But if you've got any interest in that and how we can help you, maybe promote some public transportation through this DRPT program, Andrea will be able to help with that. Upcoming TSDAC meeting, virtual meeting on 10/8. So that's an old, that's that. And some other information on a grant application workshop and agency feedback survey. So you've got a copy of this at your desk, and again, we'll include it in the minutes for your reference. So if you would like me to forward this out, Virginia, I will send you a copy of this for Mitch. But you just want to make sure that got shared with this afternoon.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from any board members? Anybody going once, going twice? That said, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Leave we adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. How you been, Peter?
And by the way,